Hello and good evening. This is Eugene Ochieng, and of course we are on the inside at GPS TV, and of course you're welcome to this high voltage discourse where of course we're looking at the legacy budget, the 2022-2023. On Thursday 7th of April 2022, CS Ukur Yatani presented to the National Assembly a 3.3 trillion budget, the last budget of President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. Greatest beneficiaries of these were the energy sector, infrastructure, security, education, IEBC, and of course it is a big boost to the big four agendas. With many Kenyans facing high levels of unemployment, Kenya debt maturing, estimated to be 8 trillion, shortages of fuel in the country, high cost of living. How do we fix all these? And actually, now the financial budget 2022-2023, a question that we will be asking on the show tonight is how is this impactful to the legacy of President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, being the last budget actually that is being read during his tenure as the President of Kenya. Well, my guest tonight who we are actually having on the show tonight, who will be helping me in dissecting this conversation. My first guest is Noah Ondakala. Noah Ondakala is a tax, finance and audit expert. Noah is a practicing member of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Kenya, ISPAC, the Institute of Certified Secretaries, and the Institute of Internal Auditors, amongst many other titles that he has. We also have on the show tonight Beatrice Kairu. Beatrice Kairu is an economy analyst and a political commentator, a governance expert. Of course, we are having her as well on the show, and thank you so much, Beatrice, for coming. The third guest tonight is Washington Junior Onyango. Washington Junior Onyango is a youth leader of Migori County, and of course, he will be giving us perspective as a youth leader, what he thinks about this budget. Of course, he's also on the show, and we are grateful for having you, lady and gentlemen. Thank you so much for accepting my invite. Well, the legacy budget, what I term as the legacy budget, was actually read on Thursday. And I'll start with you, Noah Ondakala. Almost call you Dr. Noah Ondakala because of actually a lot of titles under your name. Yes, so what actually are the main proposals of the budget 2022-2023? And actually, what informed the decision-making of such a budget that we had actually seen?
Yeah, thank you so much, my brother. Yes, you can call me CPNOA. Yeah, that gives me a little comfort. Yeah, so this budget for 2022, the theme of this budget is actually accelerating economic growth, and it's a budget that is unique in the sense that it actually comes earlier than the period that budgets are usually read in June. So this budget comes earlier because of the fact that now we are faced with the general election, and the term of this government is a bit shorter. Yeah, so mainly this budget is basically looking at the main drivers of the economy as we face this election year, and it just builds from the previous budget for the last year, which really anchored on the Big Four agenda. So what this budget is proposing is simply to continue to achieve the Big Four agenda, mainly based on the proposals that have come in, and also specifically to raise additional revenues to finance the very major activities that we have now in this election year. So you have seen that we are doing a budget of over 3.3 has to be raised. So there are a raft of measures that have been proposed. Of course, there are the winners and losers. We'll be able to see that. A lot of it is based on the budget policy to just be able to see how can we bring in new revenue streams into the tax bracket. How do we also just give reprieve to the common mwananchi who has really had a beating, especially because we are coming from the COVID pandemic. We are coming from economic recovery. Yeah, we are faced with the issues of fuel prices. We have drought, which has really faced us. So all those are ways in which the government is also trying to balance out and just say, how do we raise revenue and yet we still give reprieve and relief to the common wananchi. Okay. Yes.
Well, actually, you've mentioned a lot of things actually I'd love us to discuss. And one of the things that you have spoken about is the Big Four agenda. That actually you say that the Big Four agenda is one of the issues that informed the decision of this. What are these? Do you mind giving us the specifics actually, or where we have maybe the Big Four agendas where they were talked about, and maybe how the roadmap, what was the blueprint of maybe achieving this in this last budget?
Yeah, the Big Four agenda was basically to scale up the economy and just be able to put Kenya into what we call a developing economy. And this was anchored on the very basic four, and we are talking about infrastructural development. You've seen a lot of infrastructure developments going up. There are issues of manufacturing, because we are also faced with the need to also just create employment. So manufacturing was a driver to create employment and be able also to just increase production. There are issues of health, and also there are issues of affordable housing. So those were the four main agendas: infrastructure, healthcare, manufacturing, and then the other issue of affordable housing. Yes.
Beatrice Kairu, let me talk to you. We've actually had should I call it tough life, because people have been up and about talking about the fuel prices, and of course we've been seeing high cost of living, and of course the rate of unemployment in Kenya is actually so high. Well, let me ask you, what does this budget that we have had portend to actually the economy of Kenya at large?
First and foremost, when you look at the budget that was read recently, unfortunately this time around they have not talked about manufacturing per se. The development that they have discussed about is purely roads, and I think around 18.5 is going to the SGR. Then there's the education aspect, then there's the health aspect, and you know, in healthcare, most of it is actually more of expenditure, paying salaries, buying medicine. So there is basically no new development in that aspect. Then you look at, there is a lot of recurrent expenditures, but what most people are moving away from is the debt service. The debt service Kenya has to do is quite huge. If you look at the year around 2020, I think the Federal Reserve in the US, they were shocked that Kenya was already now broke. And Uhuru Kenyatta was trying to borrow around 75 billion to supplement the budget, because now we are at a budget deficit. So when you have a budget deficit, it means the debt service at that point was at 38%. That means for every 100 shillings the government collects, that 8% has to go to servicing a debt. Then you add salaries was around 45%, and then you look at recurrent expenditures around 40. So when you add the total is around 123 shillings. So every 100 shillings collected, we have to pay 123. So we are negative 23. So now pushing forward now in the year 2022, now the public debt is almost around, it's even higher. The debt is now even the service debt, because the public debt is around now 66%. So every 100 shillings now the Kenya revenue will, Kenya KRA will correct. It means that 66 shillings will be going to just paying debts. We have not even added development. So because you see what happens is that if you want a country to grow, you must ensure that you have an opportunity where you're going to allow people to create employment. And how can you create employment? are you giving what is it called, the populace an opportunity to set up businesses? If you look in the past few years, setting up of businesses in this country had already stalled, and even the small-scale businesses and the middle-based businesses had already started collapsing. So I am looking at Uhuru Kenyatta legacy budget, and I'm asking myself, where is the money to help people do businesses? Because it's the businesses that help in economic growth. It is not you building just roads. It is not you just, what is it called? It is not you just paying for healthcare. It is not you just ensuring food security. But how are these youth able to set up businesses to be able to bring in innovation? So right now, when you talk about manufacturing, right now it still has stalled because we've not seen anything new about it. And so long as Kenya cannot be able to promote small-scale businesses, cannot promote middle-based businesses, I don't see how we'll be able to catch up with the debt that is quite rising each and every single day.
Okay, let me give this question to direct this question to Washington. Well, a lot of issues have been discussed by the two, but now let me ask you what your view is on the same budget actually, because we get that the youth has been a consequential group generally, be it in elections or anything, and actually it should always inform the decisions of those people who are making the budget. Now, do you think that the minority groups and even the youth, do you think that maybe their plight is has also been maybe sorted out, something like that? What do you think?
Thank you very much, Eugene. I think as an individual and even to very many youths outside there, our expectations as youths in this financial year, or the budget which was just released, has not been met. You see, if you look at the entire budget, you'll get the government has allocated 10.1 billion in manufacturing, and this is something we're talking that should be giving many youths employment, fresh graduates from the university, and so on. So it actually baffles me, the space of youths in this fiscal year actually, because if only 10.1 billion has been allocated to the majority of the population, the so-called manufacturing, because this is where employment is and so many things, then you get the old have been allocated around, I think it's 39 billion for the vulnerable and the old age. So you see, already it's a mess, because there will be no employment, because whatever you have been allocated is not enough in the manufacturing industry. And each and every year our universities keep on producing fresh graduates, people want internships and so on. So personally, and even to so many youths outside there, our expectations in this 2022-2023 budget is purely...
So you look at this budget that actually we have and the previous budget, you look at the plight of the youth or even the minorities, do you see any change? Do you see maybe we're making a progress or no?
I think we are not making there's no progress we are making, particularly to the minority groups, or rather, let's say the unemployed and so on. Because if you look at this legacy budget, the so-called legacy budget, it focuses much onto, let me say, they are important, or rather, but not urgent. See, in Kenya we have got urgent things that need to be sorted like immediately. Things to do with unemployment, the youths. Those are things that in any allocation we really need to factor in, because we form up to around 60% of the total population. You see. And if you see like things like the old age, the infrastructure and so on, the government has really, in the past year and even this year, has really invested a lot of money into that sector, forgetting that the minority, those who need to be first things, we should be sorted first.
I get you so well. Mr. Noah, well, you've heard him talk about maybe the youth, actually the youth. He thinks that the youth, their plight is not maybe is not part of actually, or could not have informed the decision of this budget. He thinks that the decision, the youth actually, unemployment, things that are affecting the youth is actually urgent. But now actually, what do you think generally? Who are the losers and who are the gainers in this entire budget?
Thank you. I wouldn't say they are losers or gainers. I think in the sense, if you look at the budget itself, if you were to read through the entire budget statement, if this statement was to be actualized, you find that there are so much touching on every facet of the economy. The challenge of our budget has been implementation. Because even if you go and look into that, you'll find they have proposed to set aside budgets for the youth fund, we have the women fund, we have opportunities again available to the young people, what we call the AGBO. We have money set aside for the people living with the disabilities. They're also proposing to continue what we call the welfare programs are going to continue. It will be interesting to see how the new government is going to ensure that they keep to provide the stipend, especially for the old, and also what has been proposed in the elections. So if you ask me the losers and winners, yes, there are, but it's a balancing act in the sense that there are certain things that have not been addressed, and I think largely the entire populace is not happy because we are coming from a regime of higher prices. Just the other day, fuel was put on VAT, the 8%. People were hoping that with the rising fuel prices, probably that would be removed, but that has not been done. Again, we saw that there was excise and VAT on the gas and also the kerosene. All these things are things that we use on a daily basis. Those things have not been addressed. You see issues like excise duty on now internet and also pay TV. You are looking at things like now if you transact at the bank, previously it was 10%, now it's 20%. So every time you are transacting, you have to pay an extra 20% on those bank charges. So those are things that really the common mwananchi is paying on a daily basis. Every time you are transacting, you have to pay, and that is quite punitive. So there are winners and losers, yes, but the real issues have not been addressed. But I could say probably for the winners, you could say the people who are in manufacturing, and specifically you have seen that they are proposing to remove VAT and import duty and excise on locally assembled and manufactured vehicles. So it looks like people who are in auto manufacturing are great winners. And also there is also the proposal to also exempt VAT on supplies to those motor vehicle manufacturers. So it means the cost of producing locally made vehicles and assembled is going to be cheap. That will have a ripple effect because then people will want to go the way of buying vehicles locally. I would be keen to just see how it will affect the imported vehicles. Are you also seeing the issue of food prices? You've seen now they have removed also duty on imported eggs. Recently you've seen that we have had challenges with the eggs. You go to the supermarket and the eggs are not there. So they're also proposing to remove duties on imported eggs, specifically for hatching the chicks. So that means that people can import and we can have more hatcheries. Of course there are losers in the sense that we see some duties being imposed on, for example, the sin tax, where they are proposing to increase excise duty on certain drinks, specifically those that are locally manufactured. So we see the drive from now saying we are going to charge, like now they are proposing to charge 70 shillings per milliliter of certain locally made spirits. And that will mean that, of course, as they try to think that that will inhibit people from consumption, that industry has quite been inelastic in the sense that increased taxes have not really brought in deterrent, especially from the youth. So because it seems that people want to consume regardless of the price. So again, It's an easier way to tax, so it looks punitive, but looks people can pay, especially those who they want to take those things. Yeah.
Well, interesting. Let me get this from Beatrice. Beatrice, look at the whole budget, actually. Is there actually relief for targeting the common mwananchi? Because we have had actually, and we are still having, a tough economic time. We are in a tough economic time. Do you think maybe there's a relief for the common mwananchi in this budget?
I don't think so. The reason being, first, the budget is at 3.3. The projected revenue is 2.4. That tells you already there's still a deficit. You think that deficit, it will pay itself? I don't think so. So what this government has done, one, the disadvantage as a country we have is that we rely so heavily on tax for us to raise our revenue. And that is a dangerous way to run a country, because it means forever you'll always be in debt. But if the government, or we had smart leaders, or if we had people who really had this country in their heart, one and the greatest thing they should be working very hard right now is how do we reduce this deficit? How do we reduce our expenditure? Because it clearly, when you look at that budget, we can't afford it. So it means where do we cut down costs and where do we create more revenue? Now, when you look at their revenues, most of the time, as much as our CPA guy here has explained to us that there's now the motor vehicle people are going to benefit. But how many Kenyans are in the motor vehicle industry? How many Kenyans are, let's say, doing the eggs business? Very few, a very, very small percentage. And yet we have 75% of the Kenyan population are youths. That means it's an energetic population that could actually be doing something to actually increase the revenue for the country. But what are we doing? Sorry, what are we doing? We are looking at only subsidizing maybe importation of eggs, importation of maybe parts, importation of medicine, but not everyone is in that aspect. So eventually, one way or another, they're going to do what we call hidden costs, and the common mwananchi will eventually have to pay it, because as we project, I am fearing for the next government that will take over this government, they will have a lot of work to do, to first, and especially the debt service against the revenue or against GDP ratio. They'll have to work very hard to actually counteract that. Then from there, only development will only be experienced when now your revenue is superseding your expenditure.
Okay, thank you so much. Now, we talked about, he thinks that there are actually no relief actually for the common mwananchi. But at least I believe there can be advantage maybe for the mwananchi. Is there perhaps any advantage that this budget presents to the common mwananchi, to the youths, to Kenyans just generally?
I think I want to agree with the CPA, my learned friend here. Number one, a relief will only come to a common mwananchi when, number one, you can afford food on your table. Number two, the prices of commodities, the normal commodities, you can also afford such, you see. But now, here comes a times, yesterday, you see somebody was being arrested at the treasury when he was actually saying the cost of living is so high. So where is this relief? There will be no relief until a common mwananchi is satisfied. I can walk into a shop, buy 1 kg of sugar at 98 or 100 bob. That is a relief. But here comes a time I walk to a supermarket, a 2 kg of sugar is now 250. You see, it's alarming already. So personally, I think there's still no relief. Relief will only come when, number one, we employ our youth. We subsidize those who are in the business. Affordable loans. You see, with be it long-term or short-term, but they should be accessible. Right now, I see they gave around 175 million for youth fund and so on. But now, how many youth? What
actually could be the problem, according to you? The reason why we have this high level of actually cost of living?
The debts.
Number one is so much we are collecting, the government is collecting, is to service the debts we currently have. You see, so this one leaves us poor, let me say poor. So for them to raise again, they need to add VAT on these common goods that we are purchasing, the household goods. You see, so until we work on our debts, Eugene, I know our CPA can agree with me. That's when we'll say a common mwananchi will have a relief. But until then, life will continue to be unbearable. life will continue to be frustrating as it is right now. Life will just continue to be punitive. Yeah, so until the government works on its debts, then we lower the cost of living. The cost of living is very high. Right now, you go to a petrol station, fuel is 134.
You're talking about the government work on the debt. How is this going to happen?
Number one, we must seal the loopholes for, we know that the biggest menace we have as a country is corruption menace. You see, we collect a lot, but now a lot also goes to the pockets of these bigwigs and those in the government. So this one leaves us, instead of working on how to finance our debts, very little go to debt financing, and a lot of money goes to as a result of corruption.
Okay, I get you. Corruption being one of the issues that actually is facing us. In as much as we collect much, but again, all this cannot be used even in servicing debts because going to the pockets of a certain number of people. What do you think about this, the issue, the problems that are actually facing us, and how can we even tackle it so that in future we have perhaps a conducive budget?
So first and foremost, we have to move away from a tax-funded economy to an innovation-funded economy. Because so long as you're tax-funded economy, trust me, all the time you'll always have a huge debt deficit. Because you'll tax people up to the point you're even taxing dead bodies or even taxing their unborn children. Yeah, because you have to keep on looking for something to keep on taxing, to keep on raising money. But if this government was smart enough, if you're going to borrow money, let's say from IMF, this money should have been used maybe to be given to the youth to improve innovation. If you have a business idea, so that's when people come up with these business ideas that can generate income. What the government is not promoting things that can generate income. That's where the problem. And if you look at the Kibaki government, Kibaki walked away from taking loans to supplement any budget. He literally walked away. And even if IMF gave him loans, it was project-based loan. So a project-based loan is, for example, you say, okay, we have some 10% of youths here. They have these beautiful business ideas or beautiful innovations. Can IMF give us money? We fund this youth to be able to promote these innovations they have. Then eventually these innovations will produce something we can even export. But if you're going to borrow money to come and pay doctors, that is recurrent. When you take money to come and pay teachers, that is not improvement of the economy. It's not going to generate any sort of income. And that is where we as a government were failing. Number two, if you're going to borrow money, let's say for example, a project, let's say like agricultural machinery or agricultural expansion where it's going to be given to farmers, then it means the farmers will increase their produce, we export our produce, it generates income and we're able to pay our debt. But if you're going to borrow money and the next thing you are telling us it's a recurrent expenditure of maybe let's say the defense or the all these ministries, they're not going to generate any sort of income. The only way it's like you're doing your own budget in your own house. So long as you have a debt, you can never develop, true or false. Until the day you clear your debt is when you start now developing as an individual. So let's not sit here, lie to ourselves that so long as we are seeing roads, so long as we are seeing big hospitals, but this hospital, a hospital in itself is an expenditure. It's never a revenue generating sort of thing. So, and the road will only be a revenue generating development if that road is going to help farmers who are producing excess produce transport. It is going to help youths maybe who are developing manufacturing their products going to be exported. It's going to reach the end user or accessibility of all these products. But until we reach to that point, but you talked about where the loopholes. One is that corruption aspect. Number two, the government has not been able to come up with proper data to ensure it collects revenue to the core. And the unfortunate thing, we saw this issue of Keroche and the government. It means this person has been the big fish, or like call the elites, are the one escaping taxes. But then the KRA is running to the small people to pay taxes. You see, there is already a problem. Actually, I should say, even when you look at even the American kind of system, the rich are taxed heavily. Why? So that they fund that system of government expenditure to ensure the poor people are able to be elevated. But so long as the tax in Kenya, the one being exempted or escaping taxation, and you're now running to the normal average Kenyan, there is no way you're ever going to.
There are actually some pertinent issues actually that you've raised there. I'd love to listen your view to that, of course. But after the break, of course. course, we've talked about infrastructure development. These are actually the projects that the current government has actually measured on, instead of food on the table of the common mananchi. And of course, in the case of the Kericho breweries, saying that certain people, the rich, are not taxed. What do you think about it? And of course, all that we are going to get after the break. Of course, stay put as we continue talking about the legacy, the legacy budget 2022-2023, happening 3 months before its time, normal time. But of course, nonetheless, we still have it, and of course, we are talking about it in the insight here. 21144, that is our SMS line. You can keep in touch with us. Talk to us. Let us get to know what you think about this conversation. It is me, Eugene Chieng, but let's go for a short break.
Dear friends, why are we still talking about gender-based violence?
Why is this still an issue?
Why is it still one of the most widespread human rights violations?
We're still discriminating others based on their gender or sex.
We are the problem.
We are the physical abuse.
We are the sexual abuse.
We are the psychological abuse.
We still allow.
But not
me. But not me.
But not me.
But not me.
I want to be informed about gender-based violence.
I want to inspire others about gender-based violence.
I want to initiate change in my community.
I want to use my influence to stop gender-based violence.
I want to be counted as a hero for championing the stop against gender-based violence.
Let's not be silent. Speak out.
So join us in this journey as we talk about gender-based violence across our homes, from our homes to the rest of the world.
Can we count on you?
Can you say count me in?
Count me in.
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 Unajua the good thing about women, tunapenda kuchukua risks. Men tunachukuanga risks. Si ati sisi ni wajinga, tunajuanga. We know and we choose to take a risk.
Si hata unajua sisi tumezoea tu unadanganya, unakubali tu unadanganya. Lakini unajua like okay, tukiendelea hivyo ndio unakujanga kunote some hizo vitu zenye ulikuwa unanidanganya utakuwa ama unakuanga.
With time.
With time utakuja tu kujua. Hizo ndio vitu isha.
Unajua hujasema kitu bado. Mimi nasikia mkiwa mnaongea intern. Nasikia mnaongea vizuri. Mimi I stand to my ground. Men, you can never put your guarantee on them. Hakuna venye ati I have this dude over here, he's not giving me that attention. Ati nikuwa 100% sure hapo kando kuna mwingine mwenye niko very sure atanipatia attention. It doesn't work that way. For me, I don't agree. Kuna uchungu. Anakataa na uchungu.
Wait, stop right there. It's the kids' mind. Kids' mind. Kids' mind. Kids' mind. Enjoy this part into triangle shape. Songs, dances. Foolish and so funky. Pow, pow, pow. Violence blasting off. Amazing tomato. And Bible stories. We, at the Kids Mind, we desire to serve you with these exciting activities. Join us. Join us every Monday to Friday from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Wow! Wow!
Welcome back to the show, The Insight. Of course, we are here discussing about the legacy budget 2022-2023. And of course, I still have my guest here. And let me just take the ball to Noah. Now we're talking about the government that we have actually focused on the recurrent expenditures and salaries and such like. What do you think about this? What actually does it portend generally to our economy and even to the people who are now crying?
Thank you. Budgets are usually formulated to fund the available expenditure. So the reason why we raise funds, the reason why we tax the citizenry is because we want to raise funds to finance all the activities that the government wants to run. It's unfortunate that a lot of that goes into financing of the recurrent expenditure. So you're basically talking about largely payment of salaries and probably paying other facilities that government is also using. We are faced with a bloated government, and everybody must appreciate this, because the Constitution 2010 is the one that then, once we casted and said we need more members of parliament, we need more ministries, the devolved government, now we are talking about 47 governments, not just one. So all those must be funded. It's unfortunate that there is a lot of duplication of effort. You will find that what is happening at the county level is still what could be happening at the national government. So all this duplication of effort, that's what we have to fund. We are talking of a budget of 2.4 trillion, but again an expenditure of 2.2 trillion. We want to raise taxes directly by taxing everybody to raise 2.4 trillion. The 3.3 is the full budget, but that deficit will be funded by debt. And we are borrowing locally, and also we are borrowing from the foreign market. So if you see what we are able to collect, what we are projecting to collect from our taxes 2.4 trillion. But the 2.2 will go into recurrent expenditure. So we are left with no money for any economic expansion. That's why we have to go and borrow from the local market, and I think we are borrowing almost 581 billion locally, and also we are also borrowing in the foreign market. If you are borrowing in the local market, it means again the interest rates are going to go up, because you cannot compete with government to acquire money from the financial institutions. So there will be scarcity of money because government is able to borrow massively.
And let me ask you this. Actually, the government is proposing a monthly stipend for all the unemployed citizens.
Yes.
Where will this money come from, actually? You've actually said 2 point. We're actually spending everything.
Oh, yes.
But the government is actually proposing more.
You saw that previously KRA were being appraised for exceeding the target. I think the last quarter they collected more than what they had projected. Not the financial year, but they usually set short-term targets. So there's a quarter that they raised more money than what they had projected. So it means that if you see what the CS has proposed, a lot of the measures that have been put forth is to ensure that every available avenue for tax collection is being used. And that's why you see they are proposing very punitive. They are saying, like, for example, if you have a tax dispute with the KRA and you want to file a case of objection, the CS is proposing that you have to pay 50% of that tax as a deposit before your case is heard, and that money will be deposited in the central bank. So it means today, if you have a malicious KRA officer and says you need to pay 100 million, you have no case to answer. You need to pay half of it first to the government as a deposit before your case then can be heard. So you see, they are proposing measures that are going to also ensure that even the big fish, I don't think they are going to be spared. The only challenge is that maybe they will be looking at different people, but they intend to collect money in a very ruthless way.
Okay.
You've seen they are proposing also to raise additional 50 billion from just excess the excise tax, and they have left the commissioner of revenue, the KRA commissioner, he has been given discretion to decide every other time which goods are going to be imposed on that excise. So that leverage, that's the aggressiveness that with which we are saying. So you, as much as we are saying, where is this money going to come from? This money is going to come from taxation. So Kenyans have to brace themselves for quite difficult times in terms of recovery of taxes.
But how is this going to even happen? Because we have unemployed people who are actually, there's a proposal by the government to actually for a monthly stipend for them. But in as much as we have a monthly stipend for them, they are the same people actually, the common wananchi are the same people who are supposed to pay for these people. Like,
yeah, it is still a proposal. Yeah. So we all have to wait and see whether it is possible to continue to pay, because you see, governance also is about, and this is politics. Politics is about asking people to follow a certain course. And once they are followed, is whether you can be able then to really deliver on the promise. So,
interesting.
Yeah, so that's a political statement in terms of when you say we are going to give people this money, but again you are not really able to really tell us how is this possible.
How is this effective?
I really haven't forgotten, and I keep taking back to people when the Kibaki government came in governance, and she has said Kibaki left office when we were not having a deficit budget. And how that happened, there was a call to go out and work. He rallied most of the youth. And it's during his government that a lot of businesses that you can see today were birthed during the Kibaki era. Because he asked youth, go out there and work. So he put in place an economic environment that was able to facilitate the youth. The issues of border borders that are now being fought today have employed massive youths. The government is unable to manage that, and they are saying border have issues.
funds? Because actually in this budget, I believe, and of course it's common knowledge that they actually did better compared to the previous budget. They were allocated a bit fair. IEBC, of course, we had the judiciary being allocated fairly enough. Do you think that actually these will maybe make them improve?
Number one, you see, Eugene, strengthening these bodies necessary, they require resources to run. That is one. Number two, they need no interference. We are in a country where today, if Washington is in graft, you'll get politicians aligned to Washington or from the community of Washington say we are being targeted. You see, not bearing in mind that the same person you are talking about is being targeted. The amount you are stolen is enough to employ so many youths somewhere. You see, so I'm not only talking about giving them resources, but also the independence, where there's no interference. If you are found in graft case, let the courts, the office of the DPP, and so on, handle it until it's done. Number two, you go to judiciary. These cases should be very speedily. But now here comes a case where somebody who stole golden bag in 1986, the case is coming to, still continuing actually. You see, still it's ever mentioning, hearing, forwarding. The court will sit again next year. You see such things. We should have a timeline for these people that if you're found into graft, maximum 1 week, investigation are done, judgment and so on. And I personally don't even support those people being jailed. Those people should be taken to Uhuru Park. Like if you go to North Korea, if you are found in graft, there's nothing like courts. Taken to a public place, being shot, dead, over. So those are some of the things we really need to come up, because these people are really drying. They are milking this country dry. So those are the things So
those are some of the suggestions that actually you would have made
I would have
sitting
made.
there.
On this thing of 6,000 and so on to the vulnerable, I saw that this budget gave the social program 39 billion. But unless we have got a very the implementation, or rather, how do we gonna execute this one? Then we are wrong. Personally, there's an adage in Lowland that says, teach me how to cut the fish. Don't give me the fish. See, this 6,000 you want to give an unemployed youth or somebody. If you subsidize the price for fertilizer for my mom back at home, we'll be able, right now fertilizer retails at 7,000. Initially it was around 3,500, 4,000. See, if you subsidize fertilizer for my old man back at home, we will be able to do extensive, rather large-scale farming. The produce you can take to the market, my mom will be able to buy these common goods. But now if you give me 6,000, then the cost of living is still high, the cost of commodity is still high. Still there's nothing you are actually doing. It's just, I don't know, it's hooing people.
I get you pretty well. Sir, actually, this is a balanced, what do you think? Was this budget really balanced?
Maybe I think you mean in the sense of balanced, meaning it was fair. It wasn't like really hitting a section of the public and yet being a bit, I think that's what you mean, because otherwise if you're saying a balanced budget, it means what we are collecting, we are using. We're able to use only what we collect.
Exactly, that is what I mean.
Yeah, this was not, of course there's a deficit. That's why we are going to borrow money in the foreign market, and also we are borrowing locally from the commercial banks. And we are basically borrowing because we have to fund what we call an exaggerated bill. And that's what informs the excessive taxation, because we have also to raise that money to fund all these inefficiencies, corruption and all that. If I was the president or even the leader that would come in, I would say that we must get to a level where we can only use the money that we have. Because if you see where we are going, we are back into the 1980s, where this nation was run based on patronage from the Bretton Woods institutions, what IMF is saying, what World Bank is saying. And they are now the ones you've seen that we are supposed to now fund the restructuring of Kenya Airways. why do we have to refund the restructuring of Kenya Airways? Because now people have to be retrenched. Those people are losing livelihood, so they will not have income to fend for their families. But and yet we have to find money to ensure that when they are leaving, they are paid all their benefits to go and probably seek alternative employment or maybe go into business. And that's the challenge that we are having. People are going to business not because they are business people, but they are frustrated. Usually, they have no livelihood. So what this government should do is all the taxation should be based on the legitimate expenditure that we need to spend on. If you look at the winners in this budget, we are talking about manufacturing. We are talking about the people who run pharmaceutical manufacturers. We are talking about people who own locally assembled vehicle manufacturing plants. The question that you will ask yourself in the mirror of the youth, are the youth in this agenda? Are the youth the ones who own these businesses? So if that is not the case, how does government come up with a policy that ensures that when we say we want to facilitate manufacturing because we are creating employment, the youth are not the only ones who are there to do the job, but they also own these businesses. So how does government come up with a policy of ensuring that we have youth businesses that are being incubated and being funded by government without wasting a lot of money? Now we have to waste a lot of money and fund security. We have to fund other things, infrastructure, that do not provide for us a very immediate win. So the problem with the taxation is that the government is looking at how do we raise money, but they are forgetting that why do we need to raise the money? So that's the conversation. Government must look at it holistically. That we want to raise this money, but this is how we want to use this money. So that we can only raise the money that we legitimately need. Because there's a lot of wastage. That's why you have to be taxed for the wastage. If we are not wasting money, you will find that we will not need to pay so much exorbitant taxation.
And actually at times we've talked about corruption. There's a time that the deputy president actually mentioned that we have budgeted corruption. Like we have budgeted corruption. Actually the money that is for corruption, actually it is budgeted, it's part of it. What do you think, like, how is all this?
It is the same thing my brother Washington said, that we are financing corruption. So the easiest way to ensure that we only raise money is that that does not go into corruption is to ensure that we do not have new corruption cases. Because there's a lot of backlog on corruption cases already. So we don't need to build new. If anybody will be in this government, the only noble thing they will do for Kenyans is to ensure that there is no new corruption. So that then we are only dealing with the backlog. And once we complete the backlog, then we say, this is how we run our nation. There's no rampant corruption.
But just to raise something, what I'm learning is that I think one of the key things we need to do is civic education, big time. I know we've gone to school, studied other things, but I think 70% of Kenyans are very much ignorant on how this country is run. So when we introduce civic education, show people how corruption affects people up to the grassroots. It means even I, as Beatrice Cairo, right now I may not be in government, right now I may not be working for government, but at any one point, if I ever get to a position of leadership, because from the grassroots I've been shown a value system, I've been shown the impact of corruption, I've been shown what corruption does. Not this just listening to the news and people hear, oh, corruption, corruption. And sometimes when you go to the street and ask a normal Kenyan, what do you think corruption is? They say it's for big people, our money is supposed, but if you ask them to really critically understand what has that corruption affected your lives, a normal average Kenya will not be able to do that. So I think civic education is very key in Kenya and even in Africa, because when you go to the West, when you go to places like Finland, when you go to places like Switzerland, you'll find even an average teenager already has understood how a government should somehow be run, how our resources should be utilized. So that because if they say the youth are the future of tomorrow, if already right now the leaders I'm seeing are already being corrupt, they're taking our money, they're enriching themselves, they're driving big cars. Even now when I enter that place, what will I do? I want to do the same. So it becomes a cycle, it can never be stopped. But once you start educating people from the grassroots, from the time they're young, when now they rise to those high level positions, they will realize, I saw my mother die because of lack of medicine in a hospital, because a certain doctor somewhere took money that was meant for that medication. It is ingrained in us, and now because we have to survive as a country, and now I'm at this leadership position, I need to ensure that this money is utilized for them. So what will happen down to the grassroots, even that MCA or even that whatever institution in a small health center, they will try and maintain all those resources.
Okay, thank you so much.
Now, just a minute. If what you my sister here is talking about is totally not. You see, the other time our court ruled that to be elected, do an oversight. An MCA needs to do an oversight of the governor. Then they're saying it's not a must, you have to go to school. How will you? How is it even possible?
Okay, thank you for raising that question actually, but we need to go for a short break. Actually, there are a lot of issues that we have raised. We are still talking about the budget, the legacy budget of the Jubilee government, and of course we are dissecting it bit by bit this last budget, and of course there are a lot of issues that are being raised by my panelists here, and of course we have much more to discuss still. We are going for this short break, but when we'll be back with more, so don't touch that dial.
To be entertained and educated at the same time? Well, say no. My name is Elfinana and I will be your host for the Youth Hub, the show that gets you groove on.
And I'm Rachel Gambo, the boss.
Here at Youth Hub, we bring you fun guests, interesting topics, and play interesting games. Lazima fit in, you're like, you belong there.
Tunaishi pamoja, sasa inaweza kutrust, sasa wendi nje.
Multiple, eh? Oh my God, that one moment I was in love.
Kuna mahali mzazi yenyewe anakujua in this way, and you also know yourself in the other way.
Oh, sikata sikadumbi.
So Nikki, sema nakupe.
I'm over cash stripes, fab on the go. Money get low.
Wanna play again? Are you ready? Well. Never have I ever.
Have you ever been to a market at the comfort of your living room? Well, worry no more, because we got you. GBS TV Home Shopping is that market for you at home. Purchase, place your order, and we deliver that item to you. Oh yes, you heard me right, absolutely. All you need to do is watch the show, place your order, and we will definitely deliver that item to your doorstep. GBS TV Home Shopping is a show that will be coming to you from Mondays to Saturdays at 12:30 p.m., 2:30 p.m., 6:30 p.m., and 10:30 p.m. And of course, I'll be your host, J to the T. You can call me JT. Zaya. And this is GBS TV Home Shop.
Welcome back to the Inside. Of course, 211-444, that is our SMS line. Keep in touch with us at GBS TV Africa, at Jino Chienkwach, all our social media platforms. We're still discussing the legacy budget. Washington Junior Nyango, the legacy budget. The legacy budget, actually, it's termed the legacy budget because it's the last in Uhuru government, Jubilee government. But what legacy is it leaving to the government? What legacy actually is it contributing? Is there even a legacy? Because actually there are a lot of complaints and generally, what do you make of it?
Eugene, thank you very much. What I can say is that the budget, to me as an individual, we must accept that there are hits and misses in this budget, the previous budget, and so on. Well, do we call it legacy? We have got expressway, which is speedily coming up, is around 80% done or 90, I don't know. That's a legacy project that the president really invested money and his time as well to see its completion. Number two, we've seen things to do with universal health care, in as much as it has not been widely or rather to
expressly.
Yes, it has not been implemented in most of the counties, but it's something that was a legacy of the president. Things to do with manufacturing, in as much as the government still continues to frustrate those in the manufacturing, including the local companies, which should be actually giving jobs to the youth, the line, and so on. But there's some progress. So to me, I see it as a legacy because it's a transition actually, because the incoming regime will now pick it from there and ensure that whatever was not completed to be completed first. And as I said earlier, the budget itself is smart, and I know when there's a new government comes in place, they will implement it as it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you, Kairu. Yeah. This is a legacy budget. Yeah. What do you make of it? What legacy is it giving this government? Like, by the time we are no longer having the Jubilee government, we're going to say this is what they did actually.
So, Kibaki left a working nation. Uhuru will leave a nation in debt.
Okay.
That we must agree. So having left a nation in debt, then it means whoever will come on board has to come up with ways of clearing this debt. Because remember, even Mwai Kibaki took a government from Moi, which was also with a huge debt deficit. So he had to come up with strategies of ensuring we clear our debts, spur innovation, spur economic growth. We're able to pay our recurrent expenditure, we're able to clear our debts. We don't borrow more that is unnecessary. Whatever we borrow, we ensure we are borrowing it that can spur more growth. Now, so it means the legacy, I don't want to hit him so hard, Uhuru, but we agree we are already on the deficit side, and it's going to be a debt nation. Until now, whoever wins, whether Ruto, whether Raila, whoever comes in, will have a hard time on ensuring they come up with things that will be able to clear the debt. Now, when you look at the education sector, because money had been allocated in the education sector, I thought because he had come up with a manifesto of where the laptop project, where is it up to now? Because maybe with the laptop project right now, the students are right now joining Form 1. These people now maybe could be now spurring innovation because they'll be much more exposed to technology. But that thing has lacked for over the last 10 years. So in that education sector, he has left us with a CBC that is damn expensive for the average common Kenyan than even the previous education system that was there before. That is the legacy he's leaving. Now he's leaving an infrastructure. Yes, he said he has improved development in terms of building roads, the expressway that we are seeing right now. But he's ensuring that you are going to pay it from your own pocket for you to be able to access that load, isn't it? So it means even the SGR, he has left a debt. So yes, we are seeing roads, but these are roads based on that. It's like me wearing a dress right now, having borrowed it. Yes, I will look good in it, but that is a loan I'm wearing. So we are working on roads that are debts. Now, when you look at the agricultural sector, have we increased our production? Bearing in fact right now when he's saying fertilizer has increased, animal feeds has increased. So what do you think most farmers have done? Majority maybe have walked away from even doing the farming, even that agricultural export and all that, so production. Now when you look at it even right now, there's already drought in some of the areas. Rainfall has reduced. So that tells you even in terms of productivity, in terms of even that food security, he said part of the Big Four agenda, he has actually not achieved it. So that is the legacy he's actually leaving behind. Then you look at healthcare. We've seen him opening many hospitals. I've seen him open hospitals here in Nairobi, in other areas around the country. He has opened the hospital facility. But then you look at the UHC. How sustainable is that UHC? Owing to the fact that healthcare, I always argue that healthcare in itself is an expenditure. It can never be a revenue generating type of area. Why am I saying that? Because the moment you make health profit-making industry, what we'll have is we'll have a lot of people being forced to fall sick so that companies can make money. Well, healthcare in itself is a noble aspect. So when you look at it, have people accessed healthcare easily? As we speak, I don't think so. People are still spending out of their pocket expenditure. Then when you look at, sorry to say, even now this education sector, I was expecting him by the time he's leaving, most of the schools have been upgraded to actually accommodate the growing population. I was expecting him to have built new schools because education is under the national government, unlike healthcare, which is now devolved. But has he built any new schools? I don't think so. Parents are paying out of their pocket to build schools, which is not supposed to be the case. And what is happening right now, for your child to go to a good school currently, you have to go to the private sector, whereby the minimum you can per term is 40,000. How many Kenyans can afford 40,000 a term? And that is PP1, PP2 kind of students. And to some extent, those even in grade 1, grade 2, you're even paying 70,000. How many Kenyans can afford that? Yet we have public schools that are laying bare, not developed, looking very desolate, such that you as a common Kenyan, you cannot take your child to that school. And then they want us to be at the same level with other developing nations. That is not. I wish he had upgraded the schools. Even without the laptop project, we would have had upgraded schools. But that is not the case. So it means, come the next year, once he leaves government, Kenyans were going to pay a huge amount of money just to take your child to school. Minus healthcare, because healthcare, even when you go now to public hospitals, public facilities, you find even the NHIF that he's talking about can only pay your bed. Meaning any other expenditure, you're going to your pocket. So how many Kenyans, for example, if a Kenyan is given a bill of 300,000 Kenyans currently, how many Kenyans can afford to pay that bill? It's not possible, isn't it? So once you look at the legacy he has left, unfortunately, it is now woe unto you if you're poor. If you're poor, you're going to get it rough. If you are rich, you'll be able to comfortably live in this country. But if you're poor, I'm sorry to say, it's going to be a huge ride to actually be able to live a very comfortable life. And sorry to pick about the housing. His Big Four agenda in terms of housing. You see, housing in itself, you see, if I have a house and I am not able to eat properly, which will be my first priority? Eating, exactly. But if I reduce my recurrent expenditure, even I as an individual, I'm able to afford to build myself a decent household, isn't it? But now, when the government now pulls all its resources, it's now going to build rentals for people to use it. Are these rentals going to be free? Definitely they'll have to charge people. So where am I going to be making money from so that I can pay this same government that has built this? And yet you've not even improved that manufacturing. And you cannot tell me every individual is going to be employed in car and motor assembly. True or false? Exactly. So if you're going to build us houses on this end, and you want us as citizens to occupy these houses, it means for you to recover your money, you must charge me rent. And you have to charge me rent to the basis of the amount you have spent on those houses. But how will I pay you rent when I'm jobless? And then you're going to give me 6,000. Will 6,000 go to these houses, or 6,000 will go to food? Or where will this 6,000 be used to?
Okay, Mr. I now, okay, all that begs the question.
Yeah.
Like, okay, let's not talk about the future, but like, according to you, you see, you're an expert, financial expert. Where do you think, like, what actually are the hits and the misses? And where did we go wrong? Where did we start actually going wrong in all these? Actually, what are these things that perhaps if the Uhuru government never indulge in, then we will not be where we are today? And what are actually the hits? What have they actually done that actually you can applaud them for?
Yeah, I think we're talking about the legacy budget. And you can't divorce the budget from the legacy, the issues of governance. Because the authorities that raise funds for, and this matter, Kenya Revenue Authority, they have a mandate to raise tax, and they hand that to government. Then the government decides how they use that money. So KRA will do their job because they have targets to meet. So again, they are being pushed to raise funds to fund the economy. Where we are failing is how we are using those funds. That is where the biggest failure is. Actually, this country, people will be willing to pay tax if they can see what that money is being used for. If I would walk out of this media house and walk without feeling insecure, because the taxes I've paid have been good to put use, I will have no problem. But immediately I walk from here, I might need to be careful because of the issues of insecurity. So the issue is, yes, we are talking about the legacy budget. And for me, I would say, yes, Uhuru have done what they have done. We applaud them for that. At least everybody can speak about the Big Four agenda. Even if it's not really maybe to our expectations, already you can see there is some element of infrastructure. You can see there is conversation towards universal health care. You can see there's conversations towards manufacturing. We have now other zones. If you check around, you'll see the government has also put in place things like the special economic zones where companies can establish manufacturing large scale. We are talking about the concert technopolis in terms of ensuring that we meet the issues of ICT and innovation. So all these things are there. What needs to happen is, where will the new government take? They have to take the baton and say, we have the roads. A few new roads needs to be made. But then how do we use these roads for Kenyans to now accrue the benefits? That is the conversation. The next government must see what has already been achieved. Of course, there have been issues with the government because Uhuru's first term, we all know what happened. It was good, and then they fell, the handshake came. So he has also had all those challenges. But then within those challenges, he has also come and evolved. We have had issues of COVID, we have issues of locust invasion, we have issues of drought, and now we have the issues of oil and the crisis, and now we are going into an election. So again, our economy goes within 5 years. Every 5 years we go to an election, we have to get a challenge. So I think there are wins. The way forward is Kenyans must really carefully look at the next crop of leaders that we are voting for. Because those are the ones that will decide where this country goes. As it is, I am not able to see any leader saying, this is my agenda. Other than we are saying, okay, now we have this guy, we have this guy, it's about his time to come to power. That looks like the only thing, but there is no really an agenda that a young man saying, if I vote this government in, I see there is hope.
Okay.
That is what we need to think. And of course, there are leaders at the top, but again, we need to vote in other leaders at the grassroots, because also we can change things from the grassroots.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. Actually, we've come to the end of this show, and I'll just give you an opportunity to make your parting shot, of course, as we end the show tonight, about the legacy budget. I'll start with you, Washington.
Thank you very much, Eugene. About the legacy budget, Mr. President, if you're watching this, the cost of living is very high. The cost of commodities is very high. In as much as our expectations as youths were not met in this budget, bearing in mind that the allocation given to the youths is not commensurate to the population of the youths outside there. Today, a youth would love to commit suicide, but the cost of rope, the price of rope is very high. A youth cannot afford to buy a rope to commit suicide today. So, Mr. President, on those incoming regime, to me, I know without doubt, the best person will implement this budget and make the country where it should be. It's Raila. Baba, if you get to that position, your campaigns and your manifestos has been youth-centered. Please, don't fail the youths. Give us something in the pockets. Give us something to do. Provide jobs for our youths. Provide jobs for our mothers. Provide these basic things to the common mwananchi so that we feel being part and parcel of this country. To our youths outside there, make the right decision. Interrogate the politicians. Go thoroughly in their manifestos. Do not be wooed. Do not be cheated by the 50 bob, 200 shillings in exchange for your vote, and you will serve for 5 good years to come. Please make the right decision. The decision you will make will impact your life or it will destroy your life for the next 5 years. Thank you.
Wow. Beatrice Kairu.
All right. My message will be to every Kenyan. We are coming to an election come August 9th. And Kenyans should take advantage of the devolution. Kenyans should take advantage of devolution. Make sure you vote a very sober MCA, vote a very sober women rep, vote a very sober governor, vote a very sober senator. I know right now Kenyans are focusing on the president, but I would urge Kenyans for us to spark growth, for us to even have a change. Let's take advantage of the devolution. Choose God-fearing people, people who fear God, because apparently people who fear God somehow in one way or another may have at least a sensible of loving people. So choose the leader who you know loves people. If the leader has not loved you for the last 5 years, don't vote him back. And another caution to Kenyans, do not vote anyone who has ever been in any corruption scandal. Throw them out, vote them out, irrespective, even if they pay you 200 shillings, even if they give you 1,000 shillings, so long as they have been mentioned in corruption, vote them out. For any leader who has never done anything in your location, whether it's a ward, whether it's a constituency, do not fear, do not be intimidated. Just vote these people to go home. And if a leader cannot be able to give you their vision and how they're going to articulate and bring out that vision to fruition, then vote them out. Don't be lied to. And this time around, don't vote for parties, vote for individuals. Even if that individual does not have a party, but it's a good prospect of being a good leader, vote for that individual. That is the advice I would give to Kenyans. And I believe we are going to be a better nation if we start voting leaders based on ideologies, if we start voting leaders based on ideas, if we start voting leaders based on performance, not just talk but action. Those are the kind of leaders we want to see in after the 9th August elections. Yes.
And actually it has always been like anytime you talk about the economy, you talk about the budget, you talk about anything that deals with the people,
yes,
leadership has always been mentioned.
Exactly, exactly, because you can never rise above your leaders.
Okay.
So if you put poor leaders, you will be poor people.
Wow.
If you vote good leaders, you'll be good people. No team has ever risen above its leaders.
Okay.
So when you vote in mediocre leaders, you'll have a mediocre nation.
Wow.
You vote rich leaders, if you vote rich or knowledgeable leaders, you'll have a wealthy nation.
Wow.
So it's up to Kenyans to gauge their leaders, the kind of leaders. Has that leader been able to take people from point A to point B? And if they have failed, don't vote in failures.
Okay.
Throw them out. You don't owe any leader anything. You don't owe any leader anything.
Mr.
Yes.
Noah, what do you think about the legacy budget and all the issues that we actually have been discussing today? What would you like to talk to Kenyans, because you are an expert in finance and auditing, business generally?
Thank you so much. I just want to make an appeal to a section of Kenyans that we call the middle class. Because these are people who can afford some level of basic lifestyle, and they can take their children to middle class schools. They can go to the bank and take a loan. They can do a few things around. They can shop, they can go for holiday. Nations fail not because of bad people, but because of good men who have refused to do the right thing. So the middle class, this is your time to arise and lead, because if you don't arise, a lot of Kenyans are hopeless. If you talk to youths, they even do not understand anything about this budget. They are saying that is the government budget. We do not see anything in it to ourselves. But again, the middle class is going to fall because the taxman is thinking about the middle class. You are guys who have some level of disposable income. My sister here has said now the education system is almost collapsed, that you cannot trust to take your child in a public school. And yet those are the many schools that we should be taking our children into. Everybody is looking for the next other good school. Everybody is looking to stay into the next affluent region. And yet we have a chance to ensure that anybody can stay anywhere, anybody can take their children anywhere, anybody can walk anywhere and feel secure as a Kenyan. So my appeal to the government of the day that is going to come, you have a responsibility to redeem Kenyans and ensure that every Kenyan has a way that they can live a decent life. And you can only do that by ensuring that the way the funds are spent from taxpayers' money really gives back and says thank you to these Kenyans who are working every day. A lot of Kenyans are waking up as early as 3 a.m. and they have to walk 2 hours to go and look for that little 100 shillings for the day. The government has a responsibility to them. As you collect taxes, people are willing to pay taxes, but let them also see the reward for those taxes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, of course, this is the Insight. We've had actually a great conversation here in the Insight, and of course, one thing to pick from this is that you as a common mwananchi, as the hoi polloi, has a responsibility, being this is the last actually budget that we have had, and of course you have another opportunity to choose your leaders. Do you expect such budgets to be read again maybe next year? Okay, that is up to you. But of course it has been a discourse that we have had here with my panelists, a lady and of course 2 gentlemen, and I want to thank everyone who has made this a success. On behalf of everyone, you go have a good night till next Friday.